This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. I love when a show comes together organically. We've done a lot of different shows over the past couple weeks here on BTL. We talked about primarily right now all of the rule changes that are going on at the top levels of professional bass fishing. We did an MLF mega show, had Boyd Duckett, President and CEO of MLF, come on, talk about all of the changes at the different levels of the BPT all the way down to high school fishing. We had James Hall from Bassmaster and a panel of Bassmaster anglers talking about the Elite Series changes. Had Brad Fuller from the MPF. Anyway, it's a lot of rules, right? It's a lot of what's going on. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed over the past 14, 15 years of doing this on BTL is you get certain moments that happen where you like didn't see it coming. So last week we had Spencer Shuffield and Matt Becker on, and we were talking about the MLF team series that they did up in Pennsylvania. They took the win in pretty dominating fashion. And Ron Shuffield was at Spencer's house. And I remember, dude, Ron was like an OG. Over 25 years in the industry, 15 Bassmaster Classics, 6 Forest Wood Cups, 7 top 10 Bassmaster Classic finishes, one of the original $1 million guys. This is when, like, you know, you're talking 250 boat fields, and a lot of times you showed up and you didn't get paid. You look at the stats for a lot of the guys that have been on the Elite Series, especially since that 2019 season, and you're cashing a check every event, whether it's just getting your entry fee back, but it kind of skews it. So I remember back when I started covering, hitting that $1 million club was like, that was a big thing. I remember when Denny Brower hit the $1 million club, obviously Larry Nixon in the $1 million club, and Ron Shuffield was in that $1 million club. And then I was talking to Spencer about it. And I said, like my first year was 2007 covering the FLW tour. And Ron was like an intimidating figure. Like, to interview him, he was one of the guys you're like, okay, I got to interview Ron Shuffield, just because, you know, he had the beard and he's in the steel industry, and he just came across as like one of those old school hardcore club bass fishermen. And I was like, dude, I'd love to do a BTO with Ron. So that's the beauty of this with the technology, and we have it. We have Ron and Spencer Shuffield. Ron, thank you for jumping on BTL today. Can't thank you enough for the time.
I'm glad to be here.
Spencer, thanks for putting this together. And
Sure.
I mean, it's going to be pretty cool. I've got a bunch of different things written down on the history. I was telling you guys beforehand, I ran with Harold Allen, and you know, I love talking old school, and I don't feel like we've had enough old school BTLs. So we're going to go old school BTLs, and it's kind of going to, Ron's career kind of dovetails into your career then. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, for sure. Yep, no doubt. You know, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for him and getting me started at an early age and teaching me how to reel them in.
Ron, when was the last bass fishing interview that you did? When you just sat down and talked to someone in the media about bass fishing?
Well, you know, I was on a little deal with Spencer the other day, and we talked over some of the things and changes going on in the industry. But that's been the first one in a long, long time for me. You know, I basically have just kind of stayed out of every aspect of it since I retired in 2014. And so, and that just boiled down to the fact that I actually just burn out on the travel. I love the competition, but I saw the industry outgrowing me and kind of going more towards the younger guy. And I had other things I really wanted to do. I'd spent 30 years of my life doing that, and I was extremely blessed to have done as well as I did, but just got tired of it. It's kind of a strange deal. I think all of us sometime or another, if you do something for a long, long time, you end up just getting to the point that, hey, yeah, it's time for me to move on and do something else. And so, hey, I've enjoyed my time since I fished.
Did you like put the boat in the garage? Did you sell all your stuff, or did you still fish local, go out, fun fish, crappie fish, that type of stuff, or did you just shut it down completely?
Well, as far as I haven't owned a bass boat since I retired in 2014, and
Really?
I get to go when Spencer's home. I started him at a very early age and loved the time we spent together, and then watched him grow into a great angler himself. And so when he's home, because he's on a lot of competitive events, we still go. But honestly, crappie fishing now is my big thing. I love to go crappie fishing with him, and just the live scope when it came out, forward facing sonar. It's amazing to me just how interesting. I think it's one of the greatest technologies to come along. And definitely, if you want to take the time to learn how to use it, it is a blast. And to watch someone like Spencer, who I feel like is a forward-facing sonar guru, it's amazing. I can just not fish and watch what he can do with it. And the guys, it's the real deal. It is really the real deal. And it should help anyone who take the time to learn how to use it, go out and catch more fish and have more fun.
I don't want to blow it up. I mean, Washita. So we had it open there earlier this year, and I probably tried to catch 2 to 3.5 pound crappie for half of my practice, to my detriment, because that is a fantastic crappie lake out there. I mean, like, I was so distracted trying to catch bass because I would know, like, in the top of this tree, like, I am not benefiting myself for practice at all. But by God, that is a giant crappie down there. Is that where you guys crappie fish a lot?
We do some. Most of our crappie fishing is consisted of here on Lake Hamilton and our home lake, Lake DeGray. And of course, there's some great little lakes out western Arkansas, like Lake Greason, Lake Derricks, Lake Gillum. Really, everywhere we go, it's an amazing trip. It's just phenomenal, and we have a tremendous lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, Hamilton's got giant crappie in it. I mean,
really
if you think Washita is good, go to Hamilton in the wintertime, man. It's incredible. There'll be a school of 1,500 of them, and they're all 2.5 pounders swimming together.
Really?
They're all bite.
No, that's fantastic. No, I was just Demikium, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good one. And it comes up, and it's just like, I mean, it looks like this. It's just like a dinner plate. And then, I mean, they're built, and I had so much fun.
Big crappie.
A lot of good crappie around here.
How often do you guys get out then over the course of the year? Would you say together where you're chasing the crappie?
We probably managed to find maybe 10 to 12 trips.
Oh, okay, I mean, so fairly regularly.
Crappie trips. Yeah, crappie trips mostly. And, I stay busy too. I mean, Spencer's gone a lot, but I run a lawn service, and I've got a lot of property I have to take care of. And so, I keep myself busy, but I don't miss the opportunity to get on the water with him whenever he's home. He says, hey, Dad, I want to run down there for 3 or 4 hours to see if we catch some mess of crappie. And most of the time, that's 3 or 4 hours is more than enough time to catch us a mess of crappie.
You make him clean them all?
Oh, yeah, he does. Basically, he cleans most of them. I've got a fish cleaning station there inside my garage. And he'll get in there and work them up really quick.
Yeah, well, we usually only keep about, our limit here is 30 a person. And in my opinion, I swear there's more crappie now since LiveScope come out than there was before, because before LiveScope, you had to take advantage of it in springtime when they pulled up. And you fill your freezer up for the year. Now, I mean, typically it only takes 7 crappie to feed me, my wife, and my kids. And if I have somebody, 2 or 3 people coming over, I'll keep using 12. And so we usually when it's me and him go, usually our number's 20.
Maybe.
And we'll catch like 35 more, but we just toss them back because they're fun to catch, man. I mean, that's like the purest thump there is.
So I got a buddy he claims he's an amateur chef, but you've seen like the redfish on the half shell, or the saltwater drum on the half shell, where the scales, the skin, the whole things are on. So those bigger crappie, I try to release everything over 2 pounds in Oklahoma, but still, a 180 crappie is a 15-inch crappie.
Yeah. Right.
So what he started doing on those is you slab it, but you keep the scales on, and then you just cut the rib cage out, and then you grill it on the half shell with Cajun seasoning on it.
Yep.
Crappie on the half shell is phenomenal when you get those bigger crappie. Like that's my preferred way to do it. It's almost like a Cajun baked crappie fillet. Then you just peel it right off of the half shell. I put it on the Traeger for like 15, 20 minutes.
Yep.
It's really good stuff.
It sounds delicious. I'm
all right,
ready for some right now.
Let's talk bass fishing. All right. I want to go back to 1985. So that was 39. That was 40 years ago, Ron. Your first professional event ever would be the Georgia Invitational there at the 25th place finish. Talk about in the mid 80s, what it was like leaving a career, or when you did leave a career to become a full-time professional bass angler.
Well, I was a steel worker for Reynolds Aluminum in Jones Mill, Arkansas at the metal reduction plant. And I hired in right out of high school in 1974 and was there till the economy forced a shutdown of the plant. And so the final stretch of that shutdown was in 1985. And of course, during that entire period of time, and even growing up through my childhood, I had loved to fish. And I got into the Malvern Bass Club, Malvern, Arkansas, and I started competition there. And my first year, actually the first 3 years there, I think I won the Angler of the Year title. And then there was a tournament trail here in Arkansas, which was kind of the proving ground for the guys, a lot of the guys that went professional. It's called Mr. Bass of Arkansas, run by Porter Everett was the guy's name. And gosh, I can sit and name people like, George Cochran at the top of the list, Rob Kilby, Mark Davis, myself, Jerry Williams. I mean, and there's probably others that went on to step up into the big leagues of professional fishing. And that's where we started our careers, most of us. And we fished a wide diversity of lakes. But then when the plant shut down, I had to find something else to do. And I finally borrowed a little money from mom and dad and decided to go and fish. I tried to get in the entire trail that year, but the first event or two events I couldn't fish because they were already filled up. But the Georgia Invitational, I fished it, had never seen Lake Lanier, knew nothing about it, except I heard it had spotted bass and was fortunate enough to draw a check. Then we go to Lake Okeechobee. That was the second event, and I literally stunk. I didn't catch anything there to get a check. But then the next tournament went to Lake Sam Rayburn in Texas, and I managed to catch the biggest bass of the tournament, which at that time was a fully rigged Ranger bass boat. And that fish, believe it or not, now this is in 1986, I think.
Yeah.
That fish weighed 6 pounds and 11 ounces to win a big bass award. Now, we all know the size the fish Rayburn churns out today, but that won that big fish, and I actually finished fourth in that tournament with my total weight. So I got a decent check, got a fully rigged Ranger, and was able to sell it, and that kind of jump-started my career, and I was able to get into all of the events for the 86, 87 cycle. And hey, I made my first ever Bassmaster Classic at Louisville, Kentucky. That's where I fished. It was won by George Cochran, who probably didn't burn 2 gallons of gas from the launch ramp we took off from. Just, the Ohio River was where it was held at. It was an extremely difficult fishery. But hey, George, I give him credit. He's one of the best fishermen I've ever known in my life, because I've spent a lot of time with George. And he still, even back then, he'd sit down with a backrest, on the seat, which one of the few that ever did that. And he did that nearly throughout his entire career.
Yeah, he did. Guido Hibden did that too, but I think that was a knees issue later on in his career.
It was later on in life. And it happened to me. I never used a butt seat for many, many years. But then when the butt seat thing came available for us to sit on, as you get older, you tend to have issues with your balance somewhat. And in rough water, it was the way to go. So, gosh, that's many, many years ago to me.
So, Ron, it sounds like one bite, kind of changed the course of your career.
It really did. And, the very next year we went back to Rayburn again. And I think I had another 4th or 7th. I don't remember my finish in that event, but I also had the big fish that tournament too, the very next season. And that one weighed 10 pounds and 3 or 4 ounces.
What'd you catch that one on?
I caught that on a 4-inch ringworm on an 1/8-ounce jig head. And I was throwing at one isolated piece of buckbrush that set out off the end of a flat point up in the Caney Creek area. Yeah. And the story behind that is my first cast at that bush, I caught a 3-pounder. The next cast at the bush, I caught a 5-pounder. And the next cast, I hooked the 10, 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it weighed, and got her in. And I mean, that's the biggest bass I'd ever caught in my life. And still rates is one of the top 5 biggest ones I've ever caught.
Didn't you get it mounted?
Huh?
Didn't you get that one mounted? It sit in the house for a long time.
I don't know. I never really mounted any bass. I might have 1 or 2. I mounted a smallmouth one time that I kept for years. It was pretty nice smallmouth. But yes, and that was another boost financially to sell. And then it just so happens I picked up a Ranger. I was running their boat at the time, and hey, it was Forrest Nina got a hold of me, said we'd like to cover entry fees, and we went on from there. And I was with them basically throughout the biggest part of my career with B.A.S.S.
So Rayburn holds a special place in your heart.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, Rayburn's one of the great lakes anywhere in the United States. But yes, those 2 events. Well, we can go on even further, and I can't even tell you what year it was. I might say it was maybe 1989 when the top 100s had started. I went there, and in that event, I won that event.
Yeah.
And I won it
on Okeechobee.
Well, I won the Okeechobee event in November of '87. That was the classics in those days were in the summer. So when we went to Okeechobee, it was in November, and I just happened to go right outside of Clewiston on the west wall, found a bunch of isolated peppergrass patches that were considerably offshore, scattered, and I found those fish on gold blackback and silver blueback half-ounce Bill Lewis rattle traps.
Oh,
and
that's
it was
old
a matter
school.
of throwing, covering ground. When you'd find a patch had fish on it, you'd catch 2 or 3 on a rattle trap, but then you could put that down, pick up an 8-inch, and at that time, gill raker was the worm I was using, and I think it was red shad, and you could catch them at will. The strange thing about that thing, and a lot of people would want to say this is impossible. This actually happened, and if I had my co-anglers' names from those days, they would remember. I doubled 3 times in 2 days on an 8-inch worm.
Wow.
How
Now,
does that?
That sounds impossible, correct?
Yeah.
I would fill a bite. I'd let the fish kind of pull me down, set the hook, and I'd reel it in. And these fish, granted, they were extremely aggressive, and they were some 2 to 3 pound fish. I think the biggest one I caught probably wasn't more, I don't know, 3 1/4 or whatever. But they'd suck that bait in so hard they'd actually blow it through their gill plate. And when it'd go through their gill plates, another fish would get it. And when you'd set the hook, you had 2 fish. And it was
You had
really
one on the
strange.
line that was swimming up and down the line with the line through his
Exactly. It
gills,
was
and the other
going-
one.
Yeah, the line was going through one's mouth out of its gill plate, and the other fish had it in his mouth, hooked. And of course, the first fish had no place to go, and you get him in. I did that 3 times in 2 days, and it was amazing. I never heard of it, I never seen it, and I got to asking some people. Larry Lazone, a former professional from way back there again, Port Charlotte, Florida. I asked him, and he told me that had actually happened to him multiple times on different Florida lakes. But I've never done that ever since. I know it was a fluke, but it was one of them things I saw. And in the event I just mentioned, the top 100 at Sam Rayburn, Gerald Crawford was actually filming me because I was second place going into the final day. But I was pitching a 3/4 and 1 ounce Stanley jigs in 20-foot depth of water in hydrilla that stood somewhere around 10, 12 foot tall on the edge of a little creek ditch leading right out of Twin Docks Marina. And of course, that's where the weigh-in was being held. But I had one hit a jig, just knocked slack in it. I fought the fish all the way to the boat. When I got at the side, of course, we weren't allowed to use dip nets even that early. And I'd take and I lipped the fish. And when I picked the fish up, I saw my jig drop out of its mouth. And I got to looking, and the fish was never hooked, but he had sucked the jig through his mouth, blown it out of his gill plate, and my hook would hook on the gill plate. And that's the way I landed that fish. Got him in, and Gerald took pictures of it because I could slide the fish up like this, the jig slide down. Just like it was the craziest thing. I've only done that 1 time ever in my career, but it was a 6.5 pounder. So another blessing in disguise. I have another neat story about this tournament. The way I won it. That's my pattern, was a jig fish for the whole time. And that depth of water and pitching it. Randy Blockett. No, not Randy Blockett. Oh my gosh, I can't even remember the kid's name. Randy Mosley. Do you remember that name?
I do not. Do you know that name, Spencer?
No, I'll wait for my time.
This is the turn one of the tournaments at Spencer. He was probably 3 years old. Might not have been quite that age, but we had him a Snoopy rod, and he'd walk up and down the bank. And other fishermen and their wives would watch him when I was going up to weigh-in, so my wife could come watch. And he'd go up and down, and he's throwing that Snoopy rod with a plastic plug on it out there and reeling and jerking and doing everything like he's really fighting the fish. Oh, that's a big one, that's a big one. And, it was just a plastic plug on there. But that's, he was very tiny and probably wouldn't remember that. But Randy Mosley was leading this tournament. He also was fishing in this area, throwing a Zara spook topwater. This gives you an idea of the diversity of patterns within patterns in the same little area. And he was catching them things on a Zara spook, and I'm out there in 20, 25 foot of water pitching a jig in the middle of the ditch while he was fishing isolated willow bushes. But I drew a fisherman, and we had co-anglers. At that time, he was a professional baseball player. Cannot remember the guy's name. He was a pitcher for Cincinnati or somebody like this. And I knew I needed to have more weight than I had. I knew I had to have it the last day. And I hooked a big one. I had to move a little further back in the creek. But I pitched the jig out there, got a good thump, set the hook, and it was a big one. The fish come up, and I asked him if he'd help me. And he said, no problem. So I fight the fish up the side of the boat, and this fish literally jumps at the side of the boat as my bait flies out, and he grabs the fish in midair and hung on to it.
Wow.
And that fish is the fish that won that event for me.
Is that this fish? I don't know if you can see it. That's got to be. So I found this tournament on YouTube literally as you were talking about it, and have been playing the weigh-in clip. I think you're telling the story about that fish right there.
That's the 10-2 or 10-3, whatever she weighed.
Yeah.
And and I caught that fish on a spinning rod, 8-pound test line. So yeah, that was a thrill. Biggest bass I've ever caught.
All right, we got to go back on this. So spinning rod, 8-pound test line, 1988, 1989. I heard 4-inch ringworm, big bass that got you in this on a little one. Ron, like everyone, there was a stigma. Spencer, was there not a stigma like when you first started too? Like, I mean, what you had Brett Hyde and Ayler and Dudley like to throw it, but like spinning rod was like not the in thing, and it's like, oh, we got this West Coast stuff coming in. You're talking about some really finesse stuff here, Ron, that really are catalysts to your career that go back to the 80s. I don't think people realize that. I didn't realize that.
Well, that honestly, I look back at it now and I think, that actually was before the shaky head syndrome actually came out and got big and hot. And that was really one of them things I was doing. You could call it. It was 8-ounce jig head with a 4-inch ringworm. The only difference was I had this one on a weedless jig head, and it had a little wire weed guard. And but there again, it's a shaky head nonetheless. Yes. And I really wished I had utilized that more. I did catch quite a few fish doing that sort of technique in different places we went, but it just never hit home. I was a power fisherman. I won 7 national titles, and 5 of them were exclusively with this Stanley jig in my hand. And I caught 1 or 2 in one of the other events that helped. But I was a power fisherman. I love nothing better than to pitch at and skip under boat docks, pitch it in the middle of the thickest bug bush or willow tree I could find, and winch them out on 20, 25-pound test line. That was my whole being. And naturally, I did that probably based on the fact that when I first started fishing competitively at all, I run into an old boy that showed me the first ever rubber-legged Arky jig. I'd never tried it. He told me how many big ones he'd caught, and I'd struggled to catch anything that day. And he gave me 1 card of them. They came on a blister pack with like 12 of them in little plastic sacks, and they had a gold hook. But the ones he gave me were black. He showed me a jar of Uncle Josh pork frogs, number 11. He said, just put one of these on the back of it, take it out there, throw it, maintain contact with it, and always let it fall on a slack line. He just kind of showed you just kind of hop it up, or you drag it slow. Many different ways to fish a jig. And so I did, and my gosh, it was amazing how, that really hit me and stuck to me. I saw the potential to do really well, and I did do really well in local competitions. And it's always, the jig has always had a special place in my heart, especially
So is that
today.
like the hand-tied round rubber? Like, I mean, I know this is like a new school one, but like something like that, like with that archy head on it, and then the round rubber. And you mentioned, I mean, gold hook
And
probably
if you look
had
at
to be.
if you look at the hook on the early ones, like you're saying, they really aren't anything near like the jig hooks that we see nowadays. I mean, these are small hooks. I'd say if they were a 3/0, they were lucky. I figured they're more like 2/0s. And the fiber guard, was down a little closer to the hook itself, and so they would hang some. But gosh, I can't tell you how many hundreds of pounds of bass or thousands of pounds of bass I've caught on one of them over the years.
I mean, you were one of the guys back then. So a lot of those guys then were jig guys. I mean, you had like Houston that kind of was known as like a spinnerbait guy.
Right.
Cochran to me was a spinnerbait guy. You had a couple guys that were kind of getting into the old school rogues back then, I believe. But like, I'm thinking Biffle, I'm thinking Denny Brower. I'll even throw Randy Blockett into that mix. Like 20, 25 pound mono and a big jig was what all the top guys in the game were dominating with back then. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's true. That's probably the same four I would have named. It was just one of them things that, and I think it had a niche at that time. A lot of people hadn't caught on to that. And, a lot of people didn't actually know how to maintain touch with the jig without interfering with its fall, or couldn't detect the bite. It's something that, like I said, the jig's a special place in my heart forever, always will be, and I still love to throw one today. But it was a great thing back then. But that pattern moved on to a lot of other things as technology changed. So did that.
Were you a big game guy? Like, were we talking 20-pound big game, or what was the mono of choice?
That at the time, that was I've used tri-lane most of my entire career. That was my number one line choice. They have a great line, and yes, it was big game. If not, it was XT, the extra tough. So
extra tough, yeah.
That's the two I used, and I almost everything I ever spooled up, I was spooling it up on them rods, because that was way before we had fluorocarbon or what I would call a castable braid. I never was a great big fan of braided line anyway. It definitely has its place in certain techniques, but it wasn't something way back then that wasn't even available. So yeah, we just winched them out and had retie often to keep from breaking off or losing fish.
And then were you part of that first group of guys that went to the 7-foot rod when you were flipping to get more leverage and stuff? Is that kind of when that came about in the mid 80s? I know there was like, pistol grips, 5.5. So you watch Larry Nixon try to fight that fish at the opening of the Bassmaster with that rod that he catches out of the pads. It's like, looks like an ice fishing rod compared to what we use nowadays. But is that kind of that time period, that late 80s, early 90s, when that 7-foot flipping stick kind of became popular?
Yeah, no doubt. That was when it made its major breakthrough. And the first ones that they came out with, for the most part, were heavy, but the manufacturers listened to what the fishermen told them and were able to lighten them rods up and still maintain the strength in a very, very short period of time. So that technology, that kind of snowballed really fast once that happened. And even the jig manufacturers, there was a huge, rapid change in that environment, because Denny had the rattling jig. I think Strap King did that. Rattles wasn't even a part of the early part. It was just a rubber skirted jig with a pork frog, and eventually that evolved. Plastic manufacturers started making better trailers, but there was a whole evolution of the sport was that jig trend. And I'm gonna say that probably took place in probably a 5-year period, and hasn't changed a lot probably since the mid 90s.
It is. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to transition into the second part of your career. I want to talk to you a little bit about the decision. There were a number of top. This was right before I started covering it. I got in it in 2007. That decision when B.A.S.S went to the Elite Series in 2006 for that inaugural year. The group of guys that went over to FLW, where you had a great career over there. I want to talk about some of the cool sponsors that you had over there, and then also I mean, Spencer, that's kind of when you started jumping in here as a co-angler in the 2007 season. So we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll dive into the FLW. I like being able to say FLW and being correct. I still say it to this day, even 6 years later. I'm like, MLF, but no, we're going to dive into the FLW days. The legendary Rod Shuffield, Spencer Shuffield. It's BTL, and we will be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from B.A.S.S. Feel the rush.
Your early morning mentality is your every hour mentality. All gas, no brakes. Focus, purpose, power. Destined for the water, but confident everywhere else. A calming buzz before the storm, the truth of nature itself. You can't catch lightning in a bottle. There's a limit out there, but it's not with your gear. Unrelenting power delivery. Unparalleled weight savings. Keeping you on the water, whether you run a 9.9 or outscoping your best 5. In this rare air, there's power in the silence. It's a mindset, thinking only of the things that matter and freeing your mind from the things that you trust.
Get the best patterns backed by tournament data. Start by finding the best 10% of your lake. Know exactly what to look for and what to throw. After that, just put them in the boat. Try the Deep Dive app today.
Get that.
Gamakatsu, the innovation leader in fish hooks, is launching Nano Alpha technology in 2024. Nano Alpha is a new finish available on Gamakatsu's most popular hook styles. It delivers 2 times slicker performance, 4 times better corrosion resistance. Nano Alpha technology makes the world's greatest fish hooks even better in 2024 to help anglers catch more fish.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
All right, welcome back. BTL talking with Ron and Spencer Shuffield. I talked a little bit about before the break. Everyone wants to talk about, I guess because it's 6 years new, the MLF and the B.A.S.S split. But back in the day, in that 2004, 2005, 2006 season, if you go back and look a little bit of history, there were 2 classics there. It went from a summer to a spring classic. There was a big switch. There were a number of top professionals that opted to go over to Irwin's FLW tour as opposed to go on to that inaugural year of the 2006 Elite Series season. Ron, do you remember that time? Was that a tough decision for you? Kind of what went into that, and what was the industry like during that kind of period of time back in 05, 06?
Well, there were still a lot of innovations going on. Jerry McInnes had bought or taken over B.A.S.S at that period of time. And, when he came down, the transition year was from the 2006 in the Spring Classic at Lake Toho. The next year, there were a lot of things going into place, like fishermen were going to be required to wrap their own boats, find their own sponsorship deals, which most of us did anyway at that time. But we had to be responsible for all of that. And then for some reason or another, I thought kind of silly, they wanted to put in a dress code where you couldn't wear blue jeans, you couldn't wear flip-flops. They had to be like designer sandals if you was going to wear sandals, but flip-flops were out and blue jeans were out. And I thought, there were just some changes going on. I didn't care too much for. I wasn't the only one. There were a number of us who thought they weren't right. And so I opted out and decided to go to FLW. And it was a big change for me because I finished my career sponsored by Triton Boats and started my career with FLW back in a Ranger bass boat. So, but that was fine. I enjoyed that. Triton at the time was also going through some changes and actually sold, I think, within about a year after that, around 2007. I think Earl kind of got out of it and started leaning towards this new Camus boat that he built. But anyway, that was what happened in my case. I know there may be some different other things that other fishermen.
Yeah, there was like some schedule with that. There was one where you had to have like the Bush logo on your boat for the Angler of the Year. So there were some anglers that weren't thrilled with having to have a Bush beer logo on their boat. There were some sponsors, like as far as boats and which boat companies were aligned with which tour, I know for some guys. But here's my question on that. So you're a big name. You had all these wins under your belt. You're in the $1 Million Club. You'd had the 7 top 10 classics. Was part of the deal when you came over like, hey, we're going to get you a team deal over on FLW right off the hopper? Like, was the team deal thing a big incentive?
Sorry, I got a phone call.
Oh, it's all good.
But no, I didn't. I didn't have a guaranteed team deal or nothing like that. I know I made the announcement that I was leaving B.A.S.S. And I think it probably said it'd be the last time you'd probably see me in a Triton boat because I knew that was coming to an end. And it was a big major decision. But I went over there, and after 1 year on FLW, of course, made the Forest Wood Cup, and was fortunate enough to get a team deal rather quickly and maintain one until I decided to retire in 2014. But it wasn't really a lot of big changes. It was still a great time leaving B.A.S.S, going to FLW, which was becoming huge. The team deals were a great incentive for the sponsors, a great deal for the fishermen. A lot of good was involved in that. And I really had a great time the 7 or 8 seasons I competed over there and managed, like I said, kept a team deal with B.A.S.S. I think I was with PAM Trucking, Transportation, which is in Northwest Arkansas. And actually went and got a CDL, which was a great experience.
Oh, I remember that. They made a big deal out of that. Like, hey, he not only fishes, he's got his truck. Like, I remember that now. That was like there were like a lot of articles and stuff that were done on that.
Yeah, and I was a big skip, or I say, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I wanted to make a big deal out of every person that sits behind the wheel in any vehicle should be required to take CDL training, because I know we all hate the way big trucks we think do, getting behind them, the way they drive crazy sometimes it seems like. But if you're in one of them big trucks and you realize how crazy the people in cars drive, then you have a greater appreciation of what those guys actually go through. I mean, it was very, very interesting, and I wouldn't take anything take that back. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed that, and they were a great sponsor. And then they was moving on, and one came up with Everstart batteries, and so that's kind of the one I was with when I finished out my career with them.
Yeah, you said the PAM, was that the same as PTSI then? Is that like
PAM Transportation Services Incorporated?
Yeah. Look at that. I'm showing it up there. So that was during the time where that was it was in Arkansas, but it was nationwide. Like that was where you could be driving anywhere in the country and you would see on the back of the big rig, proud sponsor of FLW Outdoors. I mean, you couldn't make a 50-mile drive without seeing that on the back of those trucks. That was a cool time right there. And then not to mention right there, the wrapped big rig. that they had. You know, that would have to have been at Beaver Lake, wouldn't it? Where they put that one in there back when they had those Beaver Lake Invitationals and they packed that place out.
Right. Yep. They were actually headquartered there in Springdale, which is 10 minutes from Beaver Lake. So everything was there close, but they were great people, great people. I had a great time with them too.
Yeah. And then you mentioned you were ahead of your time with the battery sponsor. Now it's lithium wars going on on all tours, especially with as much as everyone's trying to run on it. But yeah, you are synonymous. I'll pull a picture up there. You are synonymous with that kind of, would you say, purple or blue and yellow Everstart jersey like that.
Yeah, I still got one or two of them old shirts there at the house. I've kept, got them in the closet tucked away.
So we just saw Rick Clunn retire, 78 years old. He'd been doing it for 50 years. You know, Spencer, you started fishing as a we talked about this last time, but in 2007, and kind of made that transition. What was the catalyst? You kind of talked about it, but man, I mean, I feel like you still had another 20 good years left in you. You mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but I'd kind of like to go into that decision in 2014 that kind of made you say, you know what? I'll take my 1.6 million in earnings, my 15 classic 6 Forest Wood Cups, and hang it up.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I got tired of the travel. I really did. And Spencer had already transformed from a co-angler, successful stint, into a professional, and he was met with immediate success, which did not surprise me at all. I mean, it actually got to the point that if I wanted to go fishing and carry him, or we fished together, I instantly got used to getting my tail kicked. Okay. And that was no problem with me. I realized how quick he was picking up on all the new fads, the new technology, the thing was going on, and was becoming an excellent fisherman. And I was burnt out. I was literally burnt out from the travel, staying in motels. Motels, when we started, or when I started my career, it wasn't a problem to back your boat up to a room and plug it in. And then it got later and later towards the end of my career, where everything was going up in 8, 10, 12 story high rises. It was hard to find any way to get a charging system to your boat. If you were fortunate, you could find a place that did have that. And so, it was just time to go. I don't know. Like I said earlier, I think anybody that's done something for 30 years, if you still love it, you can still love it, but you realize it's time to get out of it. And that's what I wanted to do. I had other goals in my life, other things I wanted to go do and spend my time doing.
Spencer, was that rough on you? I mean, we've seen, you could name the guys that are alleged. Obviously, Scott Martin comes to mind too. He's big FLW. He had Roll It ahead of him, and Chad Brower with Denny Brower. I mean, your dad's was already alleged when you joined into it. Talk about what that was like on you, kind of trying to find your own path, and whether that was challenging or whether it was helpful, or that kind of whole scenario there.
Yeah, I mean, growing up with him, I mean, we pretty much all we did is throw a jig or a rattle trap or a spinnerbait. We didn't do a lot of other stuff except for in the summer times. He roomed with a guy, Fred Bland. We called him Taco, and off my knowledge, I mean, he pretty much invented the shaky head. I mean, I'm sure somebody may have showed it to him, but he was the main force throwing a shaky head. And so in the summer times, when I was out of school and we had, multiple days we could fish, we'd go out hour and a half, 2 hours from the house to like a Lake Derricks or Gillum, D Queen, whatever, and grease in and throw a shaky head. And gosh, I don't know how many 100-fish days we had. Correct. And I mean, you're talking, that was back in like 96, 97, 98. Wow. And when I was, and of course, you can only imagine how much better the fishing was back then compared to now, because the fishermen weren't as educated, but the fish definitely weren't. But we threw jigs all the time, and usually a good day on a jig, even back then, was still 10 to 15 fish. And I mean, when we fished local tournaments together, we won nearly all of them. But I can remember some of them days we'd have 22, 23 pounds in a local tournament. We only caught 6 bass. I'd catch 2 or 3 and he'd catch 3 or 4. And when we would go out west and catch them on that shaky head, I was like, wow, man, this is a blast. And I knew it, right away. I mean, obviously it was the baits we were throwing on spinning rods. I don't know why we never threw them back onto gray and stuff much. We would some and catch big spots, and every now and then a big largemouth on it. But when I got out on tour in 2007, I started, I took all the extra classes in high school to be able to graduate early to start as a co-angler. I just fell in love with fishing with spinning rods out of the back because I could,
Make
my
money.
pro was always power fishing. I just catch so many more fish than he did. And of course, spinning rod tactics were coming on really strong then anyways. And I think it was like 2003 or 4, or maybe 2001 when Greg Hackney or Shin-Fu Kai or one of them won one of the very first tournaments ever won on a shaky head, a national tournament on Beaver Lake. And what's funny is that was a year after I think Taco quit. And he cashed all kinds of checks throwing a shaky head, but never won with it. But when Hackney or Fukai or whichever one it was won that tournament on Beaver, that's when spinning rods really started taking hold here in the U.S. And so by the time I got out there, it was already becoming a pretty big deal, but still a lot of guys weren't using the braid with fluorocarbon leader. We were throwing it still on straight mono or straight fluorocarbon. So you were constantly getting a lot of twist in your line and wind knots like crazy. And I mean, it was different because out of the back of the boat competing against a lot of the countries, I mean, I couldn't just throw a 3/4 ounce black and blue jig or a rattle trap or a spinnerbait and really compete. So I picked up a lot of stuff from a lot of the guys that I drew out there. The guys that were really good, that had a really good track record. And I'm talking like the newer, younger guys that were coming up. I can think of a few of them: Justin Kerr, Gabe Boulevard. Them were some guys I drew from out west. Not so much like a George Cochran or whatever, even though he had a great resume. I mean, he was an older guy that still fished a lot like my dad. So I would really pay attention to the guys that were up and coming, that were getting really sustained out there in their careers. I would really pay attention and take to heart to how they were fishing. And, you weren't going to catch a lot of fish behind them guys. So I really paid attention a lot more to what they were doing and just fell in love with that type of fishing. And obviously has led to why I love catching smallmouth so much, because it's pretty much strictly a spinning rod deal.
That's cool. Do you remember when Spencer won that first co-angler title on Fort Loudon, Ron?
That was with Justin Kerr.
Most definitely do I remember it. That was a real big thing. I mean, a great moment. It really made me proud, like he always does, to win that, And then I look back at the one that was it was a near miss out there at where was it? That was in Branson, Table Rock. Near miss.
Oh, when I went pro.
Yeah, the bull from North Carolina.
Brett Long.
Yeah, Brett Long.
Oh, yeah, he's really good out there.
Yeah, he just eked out the win over Spencer, in that tournament. But it was close. I thought he was going to win that.
Oh, that was your second tournament ever as a boater.
Pro. As a pro, yeah. My first one was on. I fished a open on Okeechobee, but my first true tour event was on Hartwell, and I think I was in like 7th place going into the second day. But gosh, man, I was so dumb back then. I look at things I did, and I was like, gosh, man, compared to how I would fish now, I went out and bombed the second day and had like 2 for 3 pounds or something. But yeah, that Table Rock event was when they rigged. But now that first tournament I won at Fort Loudon, Tellico, as a co-angler, was that last day I had Justin Kerr, and he was one of the guys I really looked up to out there. I never really talked to him. He was a kind of, quiet, more reserved kind of guy. I see him at the U.S. Open every year and still talk to him now, say hey and stuff, and we'll talk a little bit. But when I go out west, but I had him the last day when I won that co-angler event.
That was a big win. I mean, I knew that was jumpstart. That was the deal to kick him off, get him going. Yeah. And I never had any doubt he was going to meet with tremendous success. There's never been any question in my mind. He's so much better. And I said that before I ever retired. I told people, I said, he's so much better than I am. I mean, we did a we did a live interview up at Lake Gunnersville during our FLW stint, and not but a year or two before I got out. And I told him then, I said, this kid is so much better than I ever thought about being, and will have a tremendous career. And he has. He's just getting started, really.
That was actually my first event as a pro, was Lake Gunnersville. It was. And I finished 33rd. I had to borrow a boat and give a guy 10% of my earnings from that tournament to use his boat.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have a boat yet. Well, I think I did. It was a Sprint with an XR6 on the back of it, 150, and obviously I wasn't gonna carry it down to Gunnersville to fish out an 18-foot Sprint and get throttled. So I borrowed a guy's boat, a Ranger with a 250 show on the back of it.
Did you cash a check? Did you have to give him any money?
Yeah, I got $10,500 to finish 33rd. That was my very first tournament as a pro ever. And I finished 33rd. That's the one Paul Loss won on an A rig. And
October of 2011.
Yep, it was. That was the very first tournament I ever fished as a professional with FLW.
That's cool. I did. You might be interested in this. So I did a show with Russ Lane earlier this year, and he talked about that exact tournament. And because I asked him, I said, well, how the hell did it end up? No one had ever heard about this. And then everybody was throwing the Alabama rig by the end of that event. Like, it was amazing to me. And he like kind of went through like how it all, like, did you know during that tournament, Elias like handed him the rod and was like, here, throw this thing like in it. Like, I mean, it was that dumb that it's a cool show. He talked about like how Elias came in practice. It was like, oh my God, like I can't say anything, but this is about to be crazy.
Yeah.
That totally changed the industry.
Well, I mean, I was there at that event, you know, and I just, everybody every morning was scrambling around trying to find somebody who had an Alabama rig after the first day of that thing, just to get what you could. And so most of us that found a half a dozen jiggy heads and a few swim bait bodies and was able to buy, borrow, or beg, or steal one, well, put them on, and we knew nothing about it. Just basically like a spinner bait with 5 or 6 hooks on it. You throw it out there and reel it in. But Paul was way more advanced than that in what he did with it. But yeah, that was a cool event. I mean, that was blown away from start to finish, basically.
Paul doesn't get enough credit for the way he has won the tournament. So if you go back to the 82 Classic, the kneel and reel, that was kind of a cool thing with super deep diving plug. Then you go to 2000 and the record setting 136.2 on Falcon when he was going with the gigantic worm. Then he's got the Alabama rig in 2011. Like, Elias has some really cool signature series wins doing some really unique stuff over the years. Yeah,
Paul was a great fisherman. You know, we'd always kid him, telling him, we joke with him about being from Saudi Arabia or somewhere, because really Paul's beard and his look and everything. He was really a cool guy to be around. A lot of fun. We'd have golf matches just about every year. The last several years at B.A.S.S, well, for a number of years, a group of 6 to sometimes as many as 20 of us would go play golf the day before practice would start. And Paul was always there. He's always part of the gang, and a lot of good memories with that group of guys.
Christmas tree farmer.
Yeah, no doubt.
Christmas tree farmer. You wouldn't think of him as that, but I think he got out of that a couple of years ago. But there's one of the other guys who's isn't David Fritz have some sort of farm or something?
Gosh, I don't know. I knew he used to work in a 4-wheel drive shop.
I don't know. There's another guy who, one of the other legendary guys who had like a pumpkin patch or something like that, or as a pumpkin, like a full-time pumpkin farmer.
Huh. I'm not aware of that.
Do you keep up with any of those guys, like the Mark Davis, Paul Elias? Any of you guys still chat?
No, we really don't. You know, I haven't talked to. It's probably been, I can't tell you how many years since I've talked to any of the guys I used to fish with. I stayed in touch with Mickey Bruce for a short period of time, and just kind of lost touch with him. I see Stephen Browning every now and then over here in Hot Springs. We talk and visit about it, but really not. I mean, I know their careers are busy, and like I say, I stay exceptionally busy to not be doing anything full-time necessarily. I just stay really busy.
I think it's also interesting, like you mentioned the baits that were key to getting your start, and Spencer's like kind of the same way too, with that shaky head, with key winds and key fish and stuff, even though it was 25, 30 years apart. like kind of a light line to small worm and key fish at the right time, and you guys are off and running. So that's kind of a cool parallel.
Yeah, Spencer's good at that. He took the spinning rod thing and ran with it. I never was a great big fan of spinning tackle. I got to where I was proficient with them, but that's mostly because he'd be in the back of my boat practicing, and I see him catching them on them. And I trust me, I taught him everything I knew, and he took it and ran with it. And now he's teaching me a lot of things that I didn't know anything about. The role reversal has changed, and gosh, it's so much fun though. It's such a blast just being out there, just being on the water with him by itself alone, but to get to watch him work his magic, it's pretty amazing.
What was your first? We went through Ron's first, like kind of the money flipping setup. Remember what your first like go-to spinning rod setup was, like in 06, 07, that time of year, Spencer?
Well, he was hooked up with Abby Garcia at the time, so it would have
a Cardinal 4.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a rod named an Eagle or something. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was probably a 610 to 7-1. Fenwick, they did come out with a spinning rod that was super light. I can't remember what it was. It was kind of a goldish rod, but it was really. Oh
yeah, Fenwick was back then. That was like one of the rods that you were getting the sensitive spinning rods. I remember that. The Cardinal 4. That looks way too old though. The Cardinal 4 has been around for a while. Did it have a little bit of gold on it, if I remember?
The Cardinal 4. I don't even know.
The Cardinal 4. I think it's
green. It's that. That's green and white. There it is, right there. Is that it?
On spinning reel.
They may have changed. The original Cardinal 4 by Zebco was green and white.
Okay.
If I'm correct. In fact, I know it was. It had like a green bottom base where your handle was attached, and then the part coming up would be white. But that was my first ever remembrance of any spinning reels that I'd used.
And then that was like straight 8-pound. Not fluorocarbon, because back then, like even in that, like the fluorocarbon was too stiff, so that was like 8-pound mono, right?
Yeah, in his time probably. You were using mono on a spinning reel.
Oh yeah.
You weren't using braid in 07, were you?
I didn't even know what a leader was until the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 years of my professional career. How to tie one on, how to work it, and go with braided line. And then attach it later.
Yeah, we started using braid with fluorocarbon leaders around 2010.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. There's been so many advancements in the spinning rod world now. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Like when you look at the drag systems and the rod, I mean, you can literally, if you want to, spend $3,000 on one setup.
Yeah, I mean, we used to legit. I mean, I can remember as a kid, and even when I got older, I mean, you actually had to set the hook with a spinning rod because you're throwing it on mono, and it had so much dang stretch, and the rods were short, so you would actually reel down and bust them. Now, I mean, I couldn't tell you last time I set the hook with a spinning rod. It's literally you just pull and lean.
Yeah, these guys. These young guys today, I watch them, and I don't miss a show that they're on, but yeah, they don't set the hook. It's like they just pull. They just pull and start reeling. That's probably because, like I said, the setups, the hookups, everything's better. Mm-hmm. Just better design. There again, it all goes back to where we're going with technology. It just keeps getting better and better and better.
It does. You said what, lawn care stuff? What, like that you're staying busy? Talk a little bit about what you've got going on now, kind of what you've done since the retirement.
Well, I got out of fishing, and I started a lawn service, and that kind of grew gangbusters really, really quick. And I did that, and then we own quite a bit of property, and it's got a lot of hardwood timber on it and things. We were having trees that fall down, so instead of just letting it rot, start cutting some of that up and putting it out in front of my dad's house. He's right on the highway, and we'd sell stacks of firewood to people. And we're rural, and there's lots of people burning wood. So that started as something that's just a little bit of a sideline in the winter months, and doggone, it built into a big deal where I was doing 120, 130 cords a year, cutting it, splitting it, hauling it, stacking it. And then my dad, he'd go with me and help me, load it and unload it. And that went on until about a year before last. And of course, Daddy was getting up in his 80s, and Mom, there again, getting in the mid 60s, and we just both decided enough was enough and got out of it. So now I still mow a few yards just for fun. And but I've been at Spencer's house honestly for the last 3.5 weeks. My wife and I have decided to undertake an entire interior repaint, a house that we built and moved into 27 years ago.
Oh wow!
And man, if you want to know an issue, and I know this isn't fishing related, but wait till you have to take everything out of every shelf, every cabinet, every drawer, and find a place to put it. And the painter tell you that he's going to be 2 weeks, and it's turned into 4.
Oh boy!
So it's been a process, but we have just completed the painting, and in the next 3, 4, 5 days, we're going to start the putting back in where we took everything out, if we can find everything, and hopefully get rid of a lot of what we actually don't even need. You get older, you accumulate. You'll know one of these days. We've been married, and to see, what's the date today?
Today's the 12th.
The 12th? Well, in 14 days, my wife and I will celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
So, yeah,
Happy
and as you can
anniversary.
see by my shirt, I spend a lot of time with her. We like to go on cruise ships.
Yeah, we leave on a cruise here in a couple of weeks.
Dude, I've never done a cruise. So I just turned 40 like last month.
And, dude, you gotta
and
go.
I'm like, for some reason, there's something in me that's like, I kind of want to try one of those, but then you hear this horror stories. So you're all in on the cruises.
Oh, go. Yeah, we do. We started with Royal Caribbean. We've stayed with Royal Caribbean. They are absolutely, in my opinion, they are the best cruise ship to be on. And love it, love it, love it. My wife went with his family, Spencer and his family.
Y'all took her in January of 2023 for the first time. And then we got him on the boat in July, the next July, and he's been obsessed ever since.
What's the best length? Like, what's the best duration? Like, give me all the details on what I need to do. Like, if I'm going to book one of these, like duration, location.
Oh, any of them, 4 days, 5 days, 7 days. We prefer the 5 to 7 day ones. Mm-hmm. And hey, you don't have to carry a lot. You can carry swim trunks, shorts, loungewear, whatever. These are cruising shirts. My wife gets them for me. And, you can use them, walk around. You got casinos to play in at night. You've got shows you can go to. You can spend your days around the pool. And around every corner, there's some food buffet or something where if you get hungry, nearly any time, hey, it's sitting there waiting for you.
Food is excellent.
Yeah, and it is so much fun just to sit back, relax, have a drink, and watch people just enjoy yourself.
Yep.
And the best thing for me was she gets the Zoom internet. My phone, it don't even make it on the trip with me. I'm gone from my phone. She has hers if we need something, but really, if you think about it, you're on a cruise boat in the ocean. Yeah. Something happens, it's still going to be there waiting on you when you get home anyway. So,
yeah. All right, you sold
but
me
I recommend going. You need to do it.
Yep.
I will give that a shot. Definitely.
You go once, you go again.
It's addicting.
Anything else you want to get in here? I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So I was telling Spencer, full disclosure, I don't know if you heard this before. I was saying, that first year back in 2007, and I said it kind of in the intro, dude, you were like an intimidating figure. Like, with the hat, the way down, you had the facial hair and all that. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this time. I wasn't sure how much it would be, but I interviewed you a couple times just as like a 23-year-old back then. And I always, like I said, I always was a little bit intimidated to interview Ron Shuffield. It's just the legend and your persona. But those were the days, man. Did you intimidate the other anglers, do you think?
It was a stash.
Was that like an intentional look, like the kind of
Well, maybe. I don't know. There again, a lot of people get intimidated, but then I've been intimidated. I remember the first time I ever saw Larry Nixon.
Really?
George Cochran. I mean, those guys, they intimidate you, but you're intimidated up on the meeting. Usually if you talk to them, you realize they're just good old boys.
Mm-hmm.
And they're good at what they do, But when you fish against them, there's no reason to be intimidated, because really, once you're on the water, it's you against the fish. It's not really you against George Cochran or Larry Nixon or whoever, you know. Yeah. You got to go out there and do your job. And if you don't do your job, you know, you usually end up towards the bottom part of the pack. But there's just certain guys have this niche. I mean, it's just, but no, I don't think I intimidated anyone. If they were intimidated, they didn't really let on to me that they were.
I feel like you were like the Greg Hackney of your time.
Greg Hackney. He's one.
Oh, sure.
Like all the young guys are kind of like, oh man, I like the worst thing I could do is roll down a stretch and see freaking Hackney pull in. He is either ahead of me or behind me. Like the guy I've talked to young guys are like, I just freaking leave.
Yeah, you used to say if those instances, you know, I remember one of them tournaments on Rayburn I did well in, you know, I had no clue Denny Brower was like leading it, but I ran back into just picked a pocket I ran back into. And I don't know if this happens a lot nowadays or not, but I was in there going down the bank on one side of it, and here comes Denny Brower rolling in, and immediately this fear comes over me. Oh my gosh, he's going to think I'm poaching his fish. And Denny just shuts down and starts idling in, and he says, "You going on down this stretch?" I said, "Well, is this where you've been fishing, Denny?" He said, "Oh, that's just some of these pockets in this area, you know, and through here I've been pitching in these bushes." And I said, "Man, go to it. I'm done. I'm not going to get in your way, and I'm going to completely leave this area and go over to the other side." Like, I mean, that was something happened commonplace, that we wouldn't poach on each other's fish. If we happened to stumble in an area or we're in there and saw the leader, then we knew, hey, we're not going in there by that guy the next day, you know, and a tremendous amount of sportsmanship. I know a lot of that doesn't exist anymore, and a lot of guys cry about this and did that or this and did that. But no, we had it's almost like a brotherhood. I don't know if all that still exists, but back then it was. There was guys that they honored your water, stayed away from your water, and you know, it was fun.
I like it. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. We've been at it for over an hour. I greatly appreciate the time. Spencer, congrats on another successful season. Now, I'm just going to point this out. You're only $400K away from Ron's career earnings. So that, if you keep at this pace, that's like 2 years, could be next year, could be 3 years, but you're at 1.2, Ron, you're a little over 1.6 million, but there's not too many guys that can sit next to each other. I don't care who you are, and say that you've cashed over $1 million in checks bass fishing. I got 2 of them right there. So that's pretty cool.
That's crazy. I didn't think.
I feel so blessed to just be part of that duo. Trust me. Yeah. I mean, I still say it again. I'm so happy that he's done well as he is, and I hopefully live enough years to see him continuing to take down trophies, because I can assure you, this guy right here, he loves this and he loves the sport and loves everything about it. So we're going to keep. One thing about it, I don't think he's got a bigger cheering section.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, this show cost me some money. Looks like I'm headed on our Royal Caribbean here in a couple months. So, all right, thanks guys. I appreciate it. Have fun moving back into that house.
Oh, I'm gonna have a ball. I'll be glad to get there.
All right, see you guys.
See ya.
All right, Ron and Spencer Shuffield. Yeah, we're definitely doing more old school shows like that. I enjoyed the heck out of that. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, wrap things up here on BTL.
In 2023, we became a household name in the crappie fishing world thanks to Power Breaks, the game changer. Hey, bass fishing world, buckle up, because you're next. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the next evolution of our product line, Power Breaks Sidekick, designed to install right on your shallow water acres. We are the first and only fishing brake company to offer a breakaway system. Just like with the Game Changer, the Power Brake Sidekick has it as well. And it's not a matter of if you're going to need it, it's when. Power Brakes, the most durable fishing brakes available on the market today. Made right here in the USA with our rock-solid 2-year warranty. Hey, not all fishing brakes are built equally, and you owe it to yourself to find out why ours are different. Power Brake Sidekick. Order yours today at mypowerbrakes.com. You'll be glad you did.
Omnia Pro gives you the confidence to eliminate dead water on thousands of lakes across the U.S. Exclusively through Omnia, utilize our map layers containing critical real-time satellite information to see water temperature, water clarity, and important weather data all in one place, along with 1-foot contours for navionics and detailed CMAP social mapping. Matched with Omnia's industry-leading loyalty credit program on all your tackle and gear needs, this is the only app you need in your arsenal for success on the water.
Have you considered purchasing new electronics for your rig? The type of mounts you choose to protect your investment should be part of the decision-making process. No matter if you prefer 1, 2, or 3 graphs up front, Beatdown Outdoors has a solution for you. Adjustable, versatile, rigid, and made in the USA. What's your ultimate electronics setup? Check out the full selection of Beatdown Outdoors products by visiting beatdownoutdoors.com.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top 100, Strike King.
Gear that just plain works. Cast after cast after cast. AFTCO. Any fish, any water.
All right, wrapping things up here on a BTL after a really cool show with Ron Shuffield and Spencer Shuffield as well. And I remember those old school guys they had talked about. He mentioned the shaky head and it coming in, but there are so many of the consistent anglers that lasted on tour in those 90s, specifically, early 90s all the way through the early 2000s that made a living, a career out of a straight tail worm, like a V&M pork pin, something like that, an 1/8 to a 3/16 ounce bullet weight that they would use the toothpick, break it off, put a little 2-aught round bend offset hook in, and then throw it on 12 or 14 pound test on a bait caster. They called it worm fishing. That was like kind of the era of the worm fishing. But yeah, I've talked to a couple of them who are like, dude, we were literally like throwing a shaky head. Like it was the same thing. It was a shaky head fish. It was when 10 to 12 pounds, they're going to all these different difficult fisheries where you saw a lot of the tournaments. I mean, you were take for granted the century belt, right? 100 pounds of fish in 4 days. I mentioned Paul Elias with the record setting weight, but like that 100 pounds on the 5 fish over 4 days, the 25 pound a fish day average, man, that was like, didn't happen 20, 30 years ago. You're talking grinding out limits of fish for 10 to 12. Go back and look at like a lot of the winning weights. And the guys who were able to consistently do it were able to get offshore using triangulation. You see the technology advancements, like with what David Fritz was able to like do with a flasher, what guys were able to do kind of getting offshore and just catching a limit was critical. And a lot of times that smaller worm, I mean, he mentioned the ringworm, that straight tail worm was the way to get it done. So, hey, if you enjoyed this show and you're sitting there going, man, I wonder what so-and-so is up to, or this guy would be a great interview, leave it in the comments. You can email me, matt@basszone.com. And I'm going to incorporate a lot more legend shows into future BTL. So that's all we got for today. Like I said, shout out to Spencer and Ron Shuffield. We'll talk to everyone later. See ya.